Welcome to the Level 4 Award in External Quality Assurance. My name is Matthew Reynolds from the Education Training Academy, and I'm going to run through the qualification that includes the full qualification, including the practical of that as well. So we're going to keep it really brief, obviously, because there are many materials out there. We go into a lot deeper level, but the idea is to give you an overview of what is involved in the course. So, purposes of EQA. Now, QAs are external quality assurers. They basically look to ensure that on behalf of the awarding organizations, training centers carry out qualifications in accordance to the prescribed requirements that have been set by Ofqual. So it's all about ensuring centers are running qualifications to ensure learners are getting a really good experience and helping them to achieve their qualifications to meet vocational or meet their employment needs as well. So they need to ensure that the national standards are maintained, learner achievement performance is assessed, and ensuring that they meet the regulatory requirements of an AO. Centres are aware of what's expected of them, so it's to enable your centres that you're responsible for to carry out their assessments appropriately and in line with those requirements, ensuring that there's staff involved, that can include admin staff, those are involved in the delivery, the teaching, they're all competent and can deliver. Centres are committed to maintaining and improving their quality assurance activities. So IQA, ensuring that IQA processes are carried out, maintained, and they're done to a high standard as well. And to ensure that those centre staff are carrying out those qualifications in accordance to those awarding organisation requirements within their policies and procedures. So there's lots of disputes about the importance of an awarding organisation. So with an IQA, basically they're there to verify that internal certification, the achievements meet a certain requirement, and the benefits of EQA, and this is why it's really important, is because it verifies that quality. Think about sometimes the risks, the conflicts of interest if you've got an internal person who wants to verify how good their training center is, whereas actually, ideally, in a better situation is having that proof from a independent organization such as the awarding organization to verify that this company deliver great training and their sort of accredited status sort of confirms that. But there are good centers and there are bad centers that are accredited and not accredited. So again, it just demonstrates that confidence to your buyers as well. What's really important as well within this qualification is ideally, and it's not essential, but ideally you should carry out IQA and you should have good knowledge of IQA. And ideally, again, you should be qualified as an IQA. So a lot of the questions sort of overlap because there's lots of similarities, but the action verb sort of changes throughout. So thinking about question 1, for example, who is involved in quality assurance? And IQAs are, EQAs are. So if you've already done your IQA qualification, dig it out, have a look at our mapping guide because it actually details what elements you can start to use and piggyback on for your next essay just to save you a bit of time. But the roles, think about sampling techniques as well. They're not different, they're exactly the same. So it's all about trying to link it all together for a better picture. But as you see here, the IQA cycle and the EQA cycle is absolutely the same. So the idea here is from an IQA, it's for that internal delivery, whereas EQA is verifying that internal delivery is meeting requirements. So again, it's just the minor sort of tweaks between them. So concepts of EQA, we can talk about being accountable. So you're accountable to the awarding organizations who are accountable to Ofqual. So it means that you're responsible as an EQA for carrying out your job properly. Assessment strategies, you are ensuring that the qualifications are carried out in accordance to those strategies that have been set for that qualification or that unit. Risk factors, so thinking about your subjects, are they high-risk subjects? Are there conflicts of interest within that center? Think about the risks of those individual organizations and ensuring that we are coming up with EQA activities that address those risks. And that could be your amount of sampling as well. Transparency, make sure that all our decisions, all our feedback is transparent. We're making decisions, we're giving feedback based on facts, not on our own sort of internal opinions, which you want to avoid. And VARCs, as you should be familiar with by now, is ensuring that assessment decisions made by centers and us are meeting the industry standards. Regulations and requirements you need to think about are access and fair assessments. So I'm thinking about reasonable adjustments as well here. Are centres applying them? Are we applying them to centres fairly? So that's where UVARC comes in as well. Appeals and complaints. So are there any complaints about the organisation, about the learners? Are there any complaints about us as an awarding organisation? What policies, what procedures do we need to follow? Who else do we need to get involved in? Then you've got confidentiality. So thinking about your EQA qualification, when you have to do your practical, then you are carrying out EQA with other learners. Again, what is the process of managing their personal data? So data protection, again, is incredibly important as well. So we're not going to go too much into them because, again, we're going to cover that in the actual sort of course. Equality and diversity, and in particular here, it's reasonable adjustments. How do you apply reasonable adjustments? And are we applying them fairly as well? Are we potentially discriminating against people based on reasonable adjustments? So these are things to consider. Health and safety and welfare. Are our centres completing training or carrying out training safely to ensure that the assessors are safe, ensuring that the learners are safe? And again, as an organisation for an EQA, are you carrying out safe activities as well? And lastly, malpractice. So malpractice or maladministration, different categories really, but the idea is to ensure where qualifications or procedures are not quite meeting the requirements, what is the reasoning for that, and can we put action plans in to address it to make sure the whole sort of training is a lot better. As an EQA, you must become familiar with Ofqual's handbook, which is the general conditions of recognition. So awarding organizations need to follow this, and again, its staff within that organization will have to play out key roles to ensure that awarding organization upholds those standards of recognition. So we're going to look at how to plan IQA and EQA activities. So think about what goes in your IQA plan. So you want to be sampling your learners, your assessors, different qualifications. You want to be sampling everything. And the same goes with your EQA plan. You want to sample absolutely everything. But think about the time you have to do that. So you probably don't have time to be doing 100% sampling on everything because it's not cost effective and it's not really sampling. You're just double marking. So thinking about your plan, IQA competence. The first thing I look at is how competent the IQA is. So if I know that IQA knows what they're doing, then potentially I can think about concentrating on other centres because I'm confident in that centre's ability to actually perform highly. But we don't know how competent the IQA is until we actually dive into their reports and monitor their progress. So think about changes to any qualifications, standards, or documents. So think about the level 5 diploma in teaching. That's going to replace the DET. So again, these minor changes people are not going to be as familiar with, so they're going to need more support in that change. Think about previous action points as well. So are these centres having lots of different action points? Do we need to go visit them to ensure that they are meeting those requirements? Or are they a centre that's really competent and doesn't really need any support or guidance and supporting those action points? Again, thinking about the risk levels as well. So the risk centre is really important. So high risk centres obviously need more support than low risk centres who are generally going to have DCS, so direct claims. Preparations, so information collecting, which is a large part of the EQA role, to ensure that you have the entire assessment process in front of you to actually carry out the EQA activity in the first place. Communication is important. So how are you going to be communicating with your centres, your IQAs and their learners, or even their staff as well? So again, if you're carrying out interviews, you need to be able to communicate what you're doing, when you're going to be doing it as well. So keep it really basic as well. Admin arrangements. So what records are you keeping? Which ones are you looking at as well? So think about, you might be the personal information as well. So again, these are sort of things you need to consider. Admin as well can involve like getting your train ticket to go and visit a centre. So be mindful, it's not just about solely about the sole focus of EQA, it's about the job in hand as well. And lastly, what resources will you need to carry out the EQA as well? So normally I'll have a little tick list that I'll take with me. I might have my computer, I might have my pens. Think about all the things that you'll need. It might be a video recorder. You need to record some videos. So think about all the resources you need to carry out your role. As an EQA, you also need to be able to adapt EQA practices, because stuff happens that we know not quite prepared for, or we have emergencies which you have to deal with. And I've had basic things like carrying out a remote sampling when at the same time our local council decided to rip up the roads to install the new broadband. So I couldn't have online meetings with the centre. So again, you need to adapt to these things that happen. And you also need to do it in a way that's no detriment to the EQA protocol as well. So thinking about reasons you might need to adapt to travel. Train strikes, for example, when I go into London, how often are train strikes? Quite regularly. So I have to be really mindful of that. Again, adapting times for that. And again, EQAs or awarding organizations, again, are businesses. So they might require you to travel at certain times because it's going to be cheaper for them. Think about IT, your technology of your centers. Again, you're going to have to adapt accordingly to the challenge at hand. Learners are busy. So it's not a case of, right, I'm doing sampling tomorrow because I've got a free afternoon. Now think about your learners. When are they available? They might be working, they might have other things on. So again, you need to work around your learners as well. And training providers as well are businesses. So key people you want to interview could be off on holiday. They can be teaching, they can do other things. So again, the communications are really vital. And that's where your planning is really crucial. Actually, you can actually identify where these potential problems are and overcome them with good planning. So your role as an as an EQA is to review the process of assessment and internal quality assurance within that approved centre. And we can do that by reviewing the resources and facilities. So where are they operating out of? Do they have the necessary equipment to carry out those training courses to a high standard? Do they have the necessary people in place to carry out those training? Do they have the necessary documentation, the policies, the procedures? How do they carry out their IQA activities? So check their policies, check their IQA reports. How much detail is given? Are they identifying potential issues? Yeah, look into absolutely everything. So initial assessments, portfolios, different assessment types, witnesses, interviews, learners, staff, and even checking feedback as well from learners to see the full picture of the story. Observe your IQA giving back feedback to their assessors. Again, it's about ensuring the assessors or the training team are meeting their potential, which comes from the IQA, but their support comes from you as the EQA. Observe training delivery, observe the assessment practice, and feed back to learners. So are they given development points to learners to help them become better? And it all comes down to the education and the training and the competence of that centre. So talk to the staff, talk to the learners, talk to the witnesses, your employers, your supervisors, anyone in the workplace to find out more information. And sampling learners' work. So don't just sample work at the end. And a lot of awarding organizations sort of go down that route. But are you sampling formatively, monitoring assessments as they happen? Again, the more proactive you are, the better you can be to deal with the potential issues that may arise in the future as well. So try to be a bit more proactive when it comes to your sampling. And are you sampling work that has and has not been eternally quality assured as well? So make sure you check a mixture. Think about your assessment types. So remote sampling. There are going to be difficulties with sampling remotely. There are benefits and limitations, so just be mindful of that. Make sure you have a mixture, a variety of different sampling types. Ensure that you are agreeing action points, improvement points with your centre. So what are they not meeting compliance with? So again, addressing that. What can they do better? Helping to drive that continuous improvement. So your sampling frequencies will depend upon your centre's general experience within those qualifications. So centres who are quite new can need more support. Centres who've been going for a longer time probably should be familiar by now. But again, if they're bringing in new staff, then they're not going to be as familiar. So again, there's no sort of set rule. You need to identify and use common sense to determine how often you need to sample them. So if there's any changes, qualifications, again, that could influence the amount of sampling needed. It can be if there's any sort of difficult units. So again, think about what evidence or what assessment types are more difficult than others, and they'll probably require more sampling than others. So just think about the overall, where are problems going to be faced? Then that's the area you want to be concentrating on. So we have briefly just gone through explaining the purpose of EQA, summarizing regulations and requirements relevant to EQA, explaining how to plan your EQA, and explaining how to make those decisions. So we're going to look at the practical element, and this is sort of Unit 2. So Unit 2 is only available to those who are currently working for an awarding organisation, or those who are working at universities or organisations that accredit their own qualifications as well. So it's critical to enrol on Unit 2. You must work for an AO to evidence this unit. Otherwise, you're not going to meet any of the requirements. So the next stage is for you to plan your EQA visits, and you need to communicate your plan to your centres as well. So you must send your plan to the centres in advance, and a lot of awarding organisations do not do this. And the problem is, if you don't do that, then it's unfair because you don't know who you need, or centres don't know who needs to be sampled, which members of the team need to be available, any learners. So the idea is that we send this plan out, so then we can make those arrangements, and there's no sort of excuses of why we cannot do anything. So that plan is always good. The EQA plan must be sent to 2 different centres in advance as well. And the best way of communicating that and to demonstrating that is simply send an email with your plan to that centre and take a screenshot. Okay. There may be your own organisation processes where you send off to an admin team or to another person and they contact the centre. That's okay, but show that audit trail to show that you have communicated your plan to that centre and you've actually completed your role within that. So next we're going to look at EQA assessment. So to evidence your learning outcomes, you may have to go outside of your plan's sampling scope. So when I do EQA, is I sort of have every sort of month maybe, or every sort of visit, I'll sample different elements each time. But because of your course, you need to demonstrate learning outcomes, so you're probably going to have to demonstrate and sample other things that you may have recently done and that's not really on your planned schedule. So you can just continue and carry on as you were, but the problem with that is you're going to need to be observed more times than actually you need to. So you have to be observed once. So if you were to tweak your plan and you were to sample everything that was required in one go, it saves you having to have another observation. But it's your choice. So 1 observation is required. So ensure your arrangements and resources are in place for external monitoring and evaluation. So when it comes to your report, and you will also self-reflect on how you've met this outcome, how do you arrange for resources to allow you to carry out EQA activities? And every person is going to be different in how they meet these requirements. You need to evaluate the quality of internal quality assurance systems. So you'll be evaluating the centre's EQA processes. You need to evaluate the quality of internal staffing and internal staff expertise and competence. So who are the trainers? Who are the assessors? Who is the EQA? You are checking their competence. Do they meet the requirements against that qualification requirement? So that's for your decision to make. Determine whether the assessment arrangements, methods, and decisions meet quality requirements. So are there any set assessments that are set for your learners? Ensure that your centres are arranging assessments in accordance with those requirements. Provide staff with feedback, advice, and support which help them to maintain and improve the quality assessment. So thinking about your EQAs, probably it's going to be the most easy one to demonstrate. EQAs, are you giving them enough support? Are you giving your centre managers enough support to help them to improve that quality of assessment? Apply procedures for recording, storing, reporting information. relating to external quality assurance. So this might simply be is you might have a little statement to say, these are our procedures. We're recording. Are you okay with this? This is the reasons we're recording. Again, you're just demonstrating that. What do you do with that information as well? So again, if you're responding to everyone saying, copy everyone into it, again, think about data protection as well. Are you storing and recording that information, your videos, in the right way as well? So we might need to contact a witness within your organization to verify that if we don't observe that as part of your assessment. You also need to apply procedures to maintain confidentiality of information relating to external quality assurance. So what a lot of centers do, or a lot of individuals do within this qualification, is they will, although they are observed in their reports, they will take out the center name, the assessor name, the EQA name, and replace it by, I don't know, learner one, center one, just to ensure confidentiality within that in that part. So think about other policies, procedures in legislation, particularly health and safety. So are you following health and safety guidance? Are you ensuring your centres are following health and safety legislation as well? So again, these are all going to be variable to your own subjects of the relevance of that. But again, it's how you demonstrate that you meet those requirements. So you also apply equality and diversity and potentially bilingualism. So some subjects are easier than others. Some subjects have a zero. They don't allow for any sort of changes. So just be mindful of that. And again, it's all about, are you applying those requirements accordingly to the subjects or to the AO sort of requirements as well? And again, your own statements will back up how you met those requirements. So once you've sort of completed your assessment, and generally speaking, we recommend your desktop assessment for that, is always follow it up with your report. So your report would be just a written version of what you've gone through with the centres. So again, there's that accountability, that transparency about what's been said and what's not. Again, it just makes life a lot easier. Following the completion of your EQA report, you will reflect your own practice. So what do you think you could do better? What do you think you did well? Where are your strengths? Where are your limitations? But also you'll justify how you met those learning requirements as well. So it's quite straightforward. It's like a little questionnaire that we give you. And simply you just need to answer the questions based on what's been said. And it's all about your own practice. You'll also submit your CPD records. It needs to cover the last 3 years. And sadly, we have a lot of EQAs who don't actually update their own CVs and CPD records. So again, just make sure everything's up and current and submit that. Then lastly, you have standardization records. So you should be providing standardization activities to your centers to help them to improve. Now, I strongly recommend that you complete your standardization as part of your observation, because your center's there, your tutor's there. It makes a lot of sense to do it holistically and do it together. So once you sort of finished off your EQA activities, go straight into standardization. How can your centers do better? Make the most of that opportunity, that being there. So you need to complete standardization with your 2 centers to show how you've applied procedures to standardize assessment practices and outcome. And some individuals, they won't do it that way. They'll literally just run every sort of month. They'll run a standardization meeting with the training centers, and that's fine too. So find a way which works best for you, and it doesn't particularly matter. So 1 observation is required. So again, you need to be observed meeting every single learning outcome as well. So that's why we're saying you kind of need to tweak your sampling strategy so you can cover as many elements as one go. Otherwise, you might need 2 observations. But we strongly recommend go into standardization immediately after delivering feedback to that center. And that's how you can meet the requirements for the full EQA qualification.